Hello, my name is Janice B. Gordon, and this is Scale Your Sales Podcast. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, listed number 9 of 43 best podcasts for every sales professional. I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert, recommended by LinkedIn Sales as one of 15 innovating sales influencers to follow. In today's episode of Scale Your Sales Podcast, my guest gave a lot of insight into his background in the early days, starting off in sales and door-to-door sales, and how the B2C experience has influenced him now as VP of sales and managing a large team of SDRs. So really interesting to understand more about what is the essence of that contributes to the success of this great company. My next guest is VP Global Sales Development at Cognism. He leads the team of 100 inbound and outbound SDRs across Europe and the US. Cognism is the leading global contact data provider. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, David Bentham.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Janice. Really appreciate you inviting me on.
Yes, well, I'm really keen because I saw on your LinkedIn that a Cognism Blueprint is launching or is just launched. So tell me more about that, because after all, everyone's journey is different. So I'm really keen to understand what this is all about.
Sure. So Cognism has been a very successful UK-based startup. We initially started in 2015. Really, it was 2017 where we had our first employee, and we've now scaled to, as of today, it's about 400. I can't remember the last count, but it's about 450-ish individuals. We're at something close to around the 60 million ARR mark. Essentially the blueprint is different people from within the company talking about that scaling process and giving advice, especially on the go-to-market side of things. I joined the organization in 2018. Our VP of sales joined the organization in 2017, and our CMO joined the organization in 2019. So, in the four, I suppose between 4 to 6 years of fantastic growth for Cognism, we've learned a lot, and that's what the blueprint is all about, is writing down all those processes that we think has made us so successful.
So who's it for?
Great question. I suppose it's any go-to-market leader or CEO. I suppose it technically could be for anybody. We've tried to use a language that anybody could use, but I suppose mostly any go-to-market leaders out there that are building processes, building teams, looking to scale their organization out.
So once you have a blueprint and you've got a journey of success, you've completely smashed a lot of your targets. Surely that's of its time. Once you write a blueprint, it's like when you write a book, it's already out of date by the time it's published. There's a lot of things that have, especially with COVID, there's so many things and ways that you've adapted and reacted. Will that apply in a different environment?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think we've all been there. I'm sure you've been there as well, Janice, where you look at, you read old articles, books related to a topic that you're interested in, and it is out of date. I think my take has always been to, take everything that, I question everything that I read. That's how I'm a big book reader, but I will, go through it and actually I'll critically analyze it as I'm reading it. And the key thing is, or the reason I'm doing that is because I want to, I don't take these things as gospel, but I take them as inspiration. And I think that's really important, especially for sales leaders. Every sales process is different. We sell a product we sell a product that has a very large total addressable market. We can arguably work with any company that does B2B sales or marketing, which is obviously a huge total addressable market. And there are lots of products which are based on very small TAMs and very large ACVs, and the principles or the process that you apply to our company might not all be suitable for a company in that area. Same as the fact that we target salespeople and marketers, whereas you might be targeting CTOs, and they will, you're dealing with different people, different personalities, and therefore perhaps there'll be nuanced differences in terms of the overall process that you implement. But at the same time, like, I'm a big believer that the core values often remain the same for longer periods of time. I started out my sales career in door-to-door sales, and if I was given a B2C product to sell today, I'm sure door-to-door would still be something that I'd consider, because fundamentally it's you're getting yourself in front of prospects, and that's the most important thing. So yeah,
I think that's really interesting. Do you think that your B2C experience has helped you in the B2B world?
Yeah, 100%. So I run the sales development team at Cognism, and so we're really focused on top of funnel activity. We're generating meetings for our account executive and account management teams, and I think my experience in door-to-door was, a lot of it was, I was knocking on hundreds of doors every single day. I did it for about 3.5 years. And I think it's obviously taught me a lot about resilience, the mentality side of the game. I was made very aware of how to sell on impulse and also sell things quickly as opposed to long drawn out sales cycles. And I think on the for SDRs, they're cold calling, cold emailing, everything's about a first impression, and so yeah, there was a lot that was very, very transferable between the two, but there's also some differences where I certainly I was a lot more casual when I was going around door to door than I was than I train my team to be today, because there's just different expectations. I think in business there's a lot more bluntness. It was very rare that anybody was very rude to me at all when I was doing door to door, which surprises most people. I think people are actually worse when I cold call them than when I knock on the door. So things like that, there are differences, but certainly I think the crossover was around teaching me the mentality that was required, and also the sales skills, the sales theory that works so well when it comes to initially presenting a product or service to a prospect.
So you've just mentioned about mindset, and I wonder, in all the years that you've sold, and you talked about the resilience in sales that's necessary, and I think that they're two key elements. When I started in sales, and this is a long time ago, 1990s, cold calling, stand up, all of that, it was very much about the process, kind of like all the fact finding that you did, and the questioning was to lead people to your product. Do you see, in the time that you've been in sales, that there's been a change in that it's less on the sales skill, more on the people, the relationship you have with people, the mindset you bring into sales, and your resilience? So these are kind of like the personal skills, as opposed to the process skills. Do you see that there's a change in balance?
It's a really great question. I think that I think both are important today as they were when I first started in sales. I think that where things maybe have shifted is with the availability of information on like online, and the shift towards, I think everybody's aware of, if I want something, I can Google it, and then ultimately it's going to present to me a bunch of options that work. And I think people have got very used to having lots of options and buying according to that. So that's where perhaps being more consultative in the way that sell is important. But also I think it's just more important than ever to understand your space very well, understand your competitors, understand their strengths and weaknesses, because I think often you're going to be those are the questions that you're going to be asked very quickly, perhaps more so than before. I don't know, but overall, as I say, I think both are as important today as they were historically.
Okay, so let's talk more about your role. I'm really interested to understand how your role has changed as VP of Sales. Your responsibilities, you say, it's twofold: removing inefficiencies on behalf of your team, but also safeguarding the time for the team as well. So talk to me about why you see your role as being twofold, and those two things in particular.
Yeah, so interesting. That was a quote from someone I was speaking to called, oh gosh, I better get the name right. I think it's Richard Smith. He's a VP of sales at a fantastic company called Lego, and he's very active on LinkedIn. You should follow him if you don't already.
Oh, I'd love to get him on the podcast.
Yes, absolutely. He's a very easy person to interview.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what he said about his role. I think when I joined Cognism, I joined as an SDR, an individual contributor, and certainly, and I managed. I was a frontline manager, and then in a director role now VP today. And I ultimately agree with Richard. I think a lot of my role is to design processes and create processes that allow my salespeople to be successful, or allow the salespeople in our team to be successful. And I think, and then on the protection side, I think I pick up a lot of cross collaboration, working with other departments. But really interestingly, and it really resonated with me when Richard was talking about it. I find that often companies see SDRs as our frontline workers, cheap labor that can pick up lots of things. And I've battled over the past 5 years with other departments and other people in the company saying, oh, we need to move office furniture, let's get 10 of the SDRs to do that, and how much that impacts their time, and then ultimately like their ability to get to their number. So I totally agree. When he said that, I think it just instantly resonated, because I've had to do that so much of that myself, and very practically I've just have to push back and say no. And I think one thing that I've always tried to do is really highlight the importance of my team as more than just frontline entry level sales individuals that are just there to kind of hook and book and see what happens, but actually very highly qualified sales individuals that have a very specific and very important job in the organization. And actually, if they weren't here doing it, then really like the organization would look very different today. So I think on the protection of time, I think that's a massive role, is just the internal PR that VPs have to do to make sure that their team have the time, space, and structure to execute on the tasks that you're asking them to do.
Excellent. So leading on from that, what strategies do you use to optimize your team, your salespeople in the operation?
Yeah, what to optimize? I suppose there's a bunch of stuff. I don't really know where to start. I'm a really big believer in structure first and foremost. I think that when it comes to, and I think this is true in any sales role, I think one of the biggest inefficiencies is decision making. You sitting there and you going, should I work on this opportunity, or should I work on this opportunity, or should I be reaching out to this prospect or this prospect? And so one of my major I think one of the things that we've done really well here is we've given people a really clear playbook that removes that decision making, those kind of day-to-day, moment-to-moment decision making from them. Everybody has a really clear daily structure that they work off. I think we try and give great enablement on how they should be making those decisions, like how best to prioritize time and things like that. And often my team laugh at me, but up until I recently moved into my new role, I used to do a stand-up at 9 a.m. every single morning with my team for the past 4 years with the UK SDRs at least, and it followed exactly the same routine every Monday. There'd be a certain narrative. Every Tuesday there'd be a certain narrative. Wednesday there'd be a certain, and it'd be exact. They'd hear me repeat the same words every single day at 9 a.m. And the reason that I did that is because they knew exactly what was about to happen every single day. It kind of was that like prompt in their mind, and then everything else from there just hopefully becomes habitual. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I think if you do that well, obviously it creates the efficiency in reducing the time that people are making decisions. But further than that, I think you're gonna help your team with things like burnout, because the less decisions they're having to make, the less like energy consuming things are. It's a bit Zucker, is it Steve Jobs that used to wear the same thing every single day?
Yeah.
It's a bit Steve Jobs of me, but I think it's super important. And so I'm religious on my routine and the structure that we have for the team.
I thought I'd seen that shirt before.
Probably. I literally wore this on Monday, so unfortunately I've changed the undershirt, I promise.
Oh, have you? Oh, good. Right. Okay, I'm glad to hear it. What about the recruitment? Is there a certain type of person that you recruit that you have established is your kind of most successful stream of people that come through, that fit within your culture? How do you approach that side? Because you couldn't have grown and had all of these success and constantly smashing each of your quarter targets without the growth of all the personnel under your team.
Yeah, 100%. So we have 90 SDRs, I suppose, for context. I've got, it's a team of 90 SDRs today. So yeah, we've done a fair bit of hiring. I look for three things. I look for accountability first and foremost. That's, I want people that look inwardly first before they look externally. There are external factors that impact performance or impact your life, but I really want to be focused on the ones that say, okay, what could I have done differently first before then start to say, okay, maybe I need to change the external factor. I think curiosity is incredibly important for salespeople. Curiosity is often associated with like being curious with prospects, which is 100% true in the way you sell. But for me, it extends to just being very passionate and driven on self-development and curiosity of learning. So I want a team that are actively, they're not, I'd like to think we give great training, and we do about 3 hours for every SDR in Cognism. We do about 3 hours worth of training a week that's structured for them. But my expectation is that, for them, that's a bonus. And actually, if they're still doing their own learning and self-development, they're active in communities. We're blessed with such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the internet, and that they can go and seek out and learn from others, find mentors, etc. And then probably the biggest one is I'm absolutely massive on hiring people with a history of high achievement. For me, that's something that there is a certain mentality that you need to have to push yourself to be a high achiever in a particular field, and sometimes that's very hard to it's hard to teach that mentality. Now I always say, like, I don't mind whether you're a world champion tiddlywink player or you're the best at spelling bee in your county. It really does not matter to me what what you've excelled at, but I think pushing yourself is really important. And so, we've had great success with hiring. I think athletes is the one that lots of people are aware of, but sometimes I mind less about the athletes, but actually someone that's like a president of a society. If you've gone to college, university, and you've pushed yourself through a society to end up at the top of the tree, then I think that suggests something about you. I used to do a paper round as a kid when I was from the age of about best job in the world. So from the age of about 13 to 16, and after 1 year of doing paper rounds, I got promoted to paper sorter, which meant that I had to come in and sort the papers out for the papers of boys and girls. And I know, that honestly came from, I think they made up the role for me, but like I just wanted more. Like I just wanted, I wanted to make more money. I wanted to I wanted to be that person that kind of like is going above and beyond, and so that's something that I suppose those are the three things that I'm really looking for in any new hires.
It's interesting because I was expecting you to say resilience and mindset, because that's what we started with, but actually in looking for those winners in any field, I suppose that brings in the kind of mindset and the resilience to keep bouncing back, and whatever the challenges are, you're going for broke.
100%. Do you know what's really interesting? I'm kind of starting to, I've never vocalized this, but I'm starting to change my opinion on resilience a little bit. And actually, I think that is something that I think you can learn to become more resilient. Is my current feeling. I think, for example, I did this door-to-door sales for a long time. I think like, I'm probably a very resilient person from that, but I don't think going into the job as necessarily a very super resilient person. I remember I wanted to go to the gym. So I'd done door-to-door selling for about 3 months, and I wanted to join a new gym. And for me, that was quite like a anxiety-inducing process, because like I was kind of this very weedy skinny kid coming out of like when I was 21, and I basically walked up to the gym and I looked inside, and there was these two like PTs,
Arnold Schwarzenegger,
exactly right, looking individuals, and I was just so intimidated. And so I walked past, and I literally stood there for a second. I was like, this is absolutely crazy, Dave. Your day to day, every single day, is you knock on people's doors and ask them for, and within 10 minutes you're asking them, they're giving you their credit card to type into a like an iPad that for someone that you've just met, and you're very good at it. The fact that you can't walk up to a reception at a gym and say, hey, can I pay you to go into your gym? Like, that's what they're there for. Like, why is that so intimidating to you? So yeah, I think resilience is built. I think it's obviously fantastic if like you can you have someone that is comes in and they've clearly been through tough times, because they probably have a higher level of resilience. But at the same time, I'm mostly hiring kind of people that are coming in their first jobs. That tends to be, it's not strictly our profile, but like that often happens, and a lot of those haven't been through massive problems. If I've got someone that's has done incredibly well at school, gone to university, done incredibly well at university, and just kind of ace through life, am I going to say no to them just because like there's never been a time where they've had to where something's gone wrong? Of course I'm not. And I do think, like I say, I think it's something that you can train people on. The way that kind of I like to train it is really to help people remove the emotion from the nose. That's the big one for me. And I was always a bit of a mathematician, I suppose, and so I really think in statistics forms. There's lots of people that say this, but every no leads you closer to a yes. Well, that's honestly how I think that's how I kind of think about it. That was always my mindset, and that really aided me in not worrying about the no's. And I think that's what great leaders would do. Is I think they, like good leaders, actually from a sales perspective, will help their team be more resilient by helping them remove emotion from situation and really focus on on a process on the other side. So yeah, not something that I've ever spoken about out loud, but it's something that I'm starting to believe in.
I mean, I think there's on two fronts. I'm curious about what is the demographic makeup and diversity makeup of your team, because you've mentioned college a few times and everything. So, and then my other thing is, while you think about that one, the other thing is the phrase that you used was, every no leads you closer to yes. Our industry, sales, doesn't necessarily have a positive reputation. And, that kind of term is attached to that, where people are pushing and not listening. So it's interesting that was used to motivate you to keep going. Whereas actually that is also a phrase that's kind of has developed negative behaviors.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. So on the makeup of the team, we have so the youngest person on our team is 18, never went to university, and the eldest, and I think I'm taking a bit of a guess here, but I think he's in his late 40s, but I never ask, at a certain point you don't ask people's age, and with kids, and so we have like a very wide range, and I'm certainly a big, I really do not believe that you should hire, I never say no to people based on the fact that they don't have a degree. I never say no to people based on, they've got kids, or they're like age or gender or anything like that. And I actually really enjoy, I think good sales teams are diverse sales teams. That's incredibly important to me, and always has been. I think naturally, the applicants for this kind of role, for what is, the entry level sales role, is probably going to attract a particular type of person from an application standpoint. And so yes, a lot of them are, I think the bulk of the team is probably in that 21 to 26 type age category. But saying that, I think overall, we have a pretty good wide ranging group. And that's certainly something that we always push for and try for, especially in the way that we advertise the role and our interview process for that role. I think you were asking about, okay, so I think that mentality of every no leads you closer to you. Yes, I think yes. I think it can be incredibly dangerous. I agree. I think it could lead to someone being a very pushy salesperson if they're almost, I suppose where it could get negative is them feeling like they should get to a no, pushing towards a no almost. That was never it for me. I think I was able to go into every cold call that I made, every door that I knocked. I would go into that and open-minded, obviously hopeful that I'd get the yes, but really, and I do this now with CRM, but back when I was doing doors, I literally had a piece of paper that I'd write down every door that I went to, and I put Y N Y N, and if there's an N, I'd put the reason why, so that way it's something I could go and work on and coach on, right? I had no text, so that was really kind of the way that I could get feedback to my manager, and where there was a and I'd essentially look at that, and I knew that for on average, I could get a sale every 5 doors. That was my average. It started at about 100 probably, but then by the time I left, it's probably about every 5 doors. So if I looked at my page and I had 9 N's, I think some people might be pretty downbeat about that, but the way that I looked at it is it's almost an inevitability that the next one is the yes. And so but that didn't change my sales process. But you're absolutely right, Janice. I think it can be dangerous if it then impacts the way that you sell. But for me, it was more just compartmentalizing my emotions and making sure that I stayed stayed true to the process and not as I say, removing the emotion so that I had a more consistent process from there.
Or I'd like to understand, that I know you've got the blueprint, but is the success very much down to the culture of the company? Do you think that has the greatest share of the success?
Oh, that is a great question. I mean, it definitely has an impact.
Right.
We are truly blessed with our CEO. You know, I used to, one of my former bosses used to use a saying a fish stinks from the head down,
Yeah.
which is basically to say if a leader was bad, then the rest of the team would be bad.
Yeah.
But I actually think, and the reverse of that, right? Like obviously on the, as much as it can be a fish stinking from the head down, it could also be a fish smelling incredibly nice from the head down. I don't know. And we're very lucky because we definitely have a very good smelling fish here. And it was he's very generous with his time. He's always been actually incredibly detail orientated from a CEO perspective. One of the big things is like the success that the business has, and he has, and obviously he has as a founder and CEO. I really truly feel that everybody in our business feels like feels like we're all winning together with him. And that's because he's so generous. You know, for example, like one example, because it's really relevant because it's happening next week, is we've got President's Club next week. President's Club, I think in traditional companies is only for closers, whereas for us, you know, last year we actually had marketers on there, we had SDRs, you know, other members of the organization. This year, the marketers aren't going, but marketers have a separate kind of like offsite incentive, and I know other departments are kind of doing something similar, but the SDRs are still going on these closing, and that's something that definitely he's driven like through the organization. So and it has made a difference. I think one thing it definitely made a difference on is tenure. I think that a lot of, you know, I mentioned I've been here since 2018, VP Sales been here since 2017, and CMO has been here since 2019. You know, I think that's very representative of the organization. That actually, if you look a lot of the Cognism people up, you know, they've been around for a long time. So, and I think that's because we've always felt like we get a lot back from the organization. So yeah, I do think that it's important. Is it the biggest thing? You know, I think like product market fit and timing, and in terms of like your product and things like that, is obviously essential. I think having a fantastic sales process or go to market strategy is essential. So I'm not going to sit here and say it's the most important, but it's a massive piece in the pie. I definitely believe that.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that. So if you were on a desert island on your own, David, what would be the one thing that you took with you?
A boat.
Get off. What?
Yeah.
You'd want to get off and get back to work?
I think so. That is a great question. If I went to a desert island on my own, yeah, I mean, like I want to get off. I'm a massive extrovert, so I need people. So I suppose it would be the little ball, right? The Wilson ball. I'd need one of those just to have someone to talk to, I think. But yeah, I mean, like maybe if I knew it was for a short period of time and I was like isolating for a bit, you know, I've always wanted to become fluent in other languages and things like that. So maybe I'd use that time. Maybe Duolingo would be the answer, and I'd just become the best, you know, Duolingo expert and try and learn a couple of other languages.
Right.
But yeah.
So whatever you have, I'll give you Wilson as well, so you won't be alone.
Okay, perfect.
All right?
Thank you. I
and you can draw the face yourself. You know, I'll give you a pen to do that, so you can have
awesome.
Whatever gender you would like.
Okay, noted.
Or you could have a gender on each side. There's several sides to this.
True. It could have a split personality. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know whether I'm keen on. Yeah, who knows? Like, but
you might end up having a split personality if I leave you on there too long.
I definitely think so. I'll definitely be talking to myself because I need someone to talk to. So.
Right. So how can listeners get hold of you, David?
Yeah, so best place is LinkedIn. It's just my name's David Bentham. We are producing a bunch of content on there all around sales development. So feel free to give me a follow or a connect. I would say Twitter, but I only talk about Wolves Football Club on Twitter. So unless you're interested in Wolves, don't touch me on Twitter.
All right, brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing your experience and knowledge. I've learned so much that I didn't know about you. So this has been really interesting. Thank you so much for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast, David.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Scale Your Sales podcast. If you like this discussion, feel free to listen to other episodes or watch the captioned show on YouTube and subscribe to future episodes. I would really appreciate it if you would leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you.